G'day, I'm Pete, the Aussie Bush Cop. In 2012 I retired from the New South Wales Police Force and moved to King Island and became a homesteader. And I'd like to share some of my stories with you. G'day everybody, it's great to be with you again, and thanks for joining me. I really enjoy reading all your comments, and some of the comments that I get is, what's it like to live on King Island? Well, today I have a bit of an answer to that question. Our producer has written an anthem and produced a video about living on King Island. And we're going to show it at the end of this podcast. So hang around and you'll get a real treat at the end. The story for today is not going to make me look in a very good light, most likely for some of you. But I don't resile from telling stories that may well do that for me, because I've been through the rigours of it all. I know that I did the right thing, and I'll give an explanation, pardon me, for it at the end. Both of these stories involve fatal motor vehicle accidents, and of course they are, by very nature, serious things. The first one, I was asleep in bed, and I got a phone call. When you're in the police and you're at these tiny police stations, there's a phone next to your bed, and and when it rings at 2 o'clock in the morning, it's never because you've won lotto. It's because something really bad has happened, and you have to go and deal with it, or assist at least in the job. And so this story happened like that. I don't recall what time it was, but it was certainly in the middle of the night. The phone rings and I answer it, and they go, "Pete, you've got a job, blah, blah, blah." So you go and put my uniform on. For instances like that, we have a pair of overalls. They're much quicker to put on. So it's, just go and put the overalls on, put the gun belt on, get in the truck and go. This particular job was about a man that had been run over by a semi-trailer on a highway. And I already know that before I leave. And so I call it stealing myself. And I did it 10,000 million times. When you're going to a really serious job, it's a way that you sort of, your body reacts, physically reacts, emotionally reacts when you're going to something that you know is just going to be god awful. So it was a bit of a way to get there. And when I got there up to this highway, the detectives were already there. Two lady detectives were there, and because it was a crime scene, they hadn't moved the body, and the crime scene detectives were on the way. And the reason they wanted me there was that it was sort of close to my area, and they wanted to know the identity of the person. And this is the part that won't make me look all that good, simply because when you're going to something like that, and I said about steeling yourself and preparing yourself emotionally for seeing something horrible, and it's just truly horrible. You see someone, and the truck, I forgot to say, was still over the deceased, and which indicated to me straight away that the truck driver was obeying. It was a really, really low speed limit where it happened, and he was able to stop in time. So when I had my torch and I climbed in underneath the semi-trailer, and the detectives asked me the question, "Do you know who it is?" And and I still feel a bit embarrassed about saying this, but I said, "Yeah, that's Speed Hump." And they said, "Oh, you're a sick bastard." Anyway, I did feel horrible about that, but he didn't hear it, of course. And but the reason for doing that is that it requires, when you're seeing something traumatic like that, it requires actually an emotional release, and that can happen in various ways. One of them is to break down, become emotional. But that, of course, is completely inappropriate, and you can't do that. And you instinctively know that. And the other way is to use you might say, some sort of very crude humour. And so that's that story. And the detectives went on from there. The crime scene detective came and they took photographs, and we got the identity of the man. And then, fortunately, I didn't have to hang around anymore after that, and I went back home and probably went back home and back to sleep. And the detectives had to go and find the next of kin and tell the poor wife that her husband was dead. The next story, again, won't paint me in a good light for some of you. And I don't resile from that, because being a policeman means you have a job to do, and you've got to do it, and you've got to get it done, and you've got to do your job even when it's tough. That's why coppers need to be tough-minded. But it's an interesting mix of being tough-minded and also very sensitive and kind. It's an interesting mix, fascinating mix. And this is one of those days when both of those attributes were being employed. So this story was about another man that got run over by a truck, a semi-trailer. Fortunately, I didn't have to see anything at this scene, but I was called up in the middle of the night. I was in bed asleep and went over to the scene, and my only job was to take the driver of the truck into a regional hospital where he would supply some of his urine and blood, and that would be examined by a specialist doctor to detect if there's any alcohol or illegal drugs or any kind of drugs in his system. Now, for that purpose, probably a lot of people don't know this, but if you ever see the news, you see that, and they say the driver was taken for mandatory blood and urine analysis. And that's all it was. This driver certainly did nothing wrong. He was entirely innocent. I knew that when I got there. But for the purposes of it, he's actually under arrest. And that's an important part of this story. He's actually under arrest. So, and he was a lovely man, just broken by what had just happened. This fellow just wandered onto the highway and he just had no choice but to hit him. And the man that I'm talking about was certainly mature age, been driving trucks for who knows how long, most likely decades. And he's got to go into the hospital to have blood and urine taken. So he's just sitting in the front seat of my truck, and off we go, and I'm being sensitive and kind towards him, having no idea what it's like for him to have witnessed that and to know that, whether it was an illegal act or not, he's just taken someone's life, and that's never easy. Anyway, so we're on our way into the regional hospital, which was, maybe half an hour away. So when we got in there, we pulled up out the front of the hospital. We got to go to the emergency ward where they do this procedure. And the emergency, when we got out of our vehicle, I heard someone call out. Words to the effect of, "There he is, there's the killer." And it was someone that knew the deceased, who I'm not sure, but may well have even seen the fatality happen. I'm not sure about that. The driver said, "I was afraid this was going to happen," and he was visibly perturbed. His voice sounded shaky. And I think I put my hand in the small of his back and just gently ushered him in, because I wanted to get him inside, because the person that said it was certainly volatile. And I didn't want any harm to happen to my prisoner. We went into the hospital through the normal doors. They were waiting for us, but I then did a reconnaissance of the emergency ward, and it was about 3/4 full of very sick, injured people. It was a really busy night there. So I did a reconnaissance and to see what was going on. And then my prisoner and I just sat down in not a waiting area, but just on a couple of chairs inside the emergency ward because his matter wasn't urgent, and we were waiting, and I had no idea how long that was going to take. Then maybe we might have been seated for in the order of 5 to 10 minutes. And to get into the hospital, we had to walk through initially off the street or off the car park area was an electric door, heavy electric glass door, and then those heavy flaps immediately before you enter the emergency ward, those heavy plastic flaps. I didn't probably hear the electric doors open, but I certainly heard the plastic flaps open, and in comes this fellow that bellowed just shortly before at him and was in a foul, aggressive mood. And he was in there to cause absolute mayhem and most likely to try and assault my prisoner. I had very little time to think about this, and another thing in the police, you don't have time to sit down and cogigate and think, what am I going to do here? You don't have time to ponder your navel. You react. And you probably know what I'm talking about. So I stood up and I took hold of this person by here and by the top of his belt. And because I'm quite tall, certainly taller than most people, I often use that to keep people off balance. But I didn't turn him around, I just marched him backwards. That's the only risk involved in that. He could spit at me, and that was certainly something that was operating in my mind, that he could spit. But the benefit of walking someone's backwards is that you maintain control over them, because most people don't like walking backwards. And I had him slightly arched backwards. So he walked through the plastic flap doors, got to the electric doors, and I just pushed him out the doors. And I said, if you come back in here again, I'm going to lock you up. There were some people outside sitting there who saw the very last part of that. They certainly weren't a witness to him coming in, and they weren't a witness to him bellowing before. They weren't a witness to him coming in, the demeanour that he had in the emergency ward. So I was very concerned about if he put on a fight inside the emergency ward, all the sick and injured people that were in there, and there must have been, I would say, about 10 to 12 of them. I had responsibility for all of them. And so when I pushed him outside, and when you might say, well, what power did you have to do that? And the power is, in New South Wales, in Australian police, we have the power, a common law power, of breach of the peace arrest. A breach of the peace is when there's likely to be a breach of the peace, or a breach of the peace is actually happening. Now, I would contend that a breach of the peace was already happening when he came into that room, into that ward. And so I used that power. There's no charge. You can't charge someone with a breach of the peace. It's just a power of arrest. And the power of arrest means you can take that person and take them somewhere else where so that the breach of the peace cannot continue to occur. And that's what I did. So the hospital did their procedure on this fellow, and I took him back to his truck, and he was free. And then when I got back to the big police station where I was working that morning, I was summoned to the commander's office, and that's generally not a good thing. When you get called up to the commander's office, that person has the rank of superintendent. And he said, Peter, I've had a complaint about your conduct this morning at the hospital. And another officer came with me, and he said, sir, I can tell you what happened. Peter's already spoken to me about that. And I just explained to the superintendent what had happened. and what my concerns were. And he was completely satisfied with that. So they're the things that can happen when you're asleep in your bed and the phone rings. And I can tell you that to this day, I do not have a phone in our bedroom. When I go to bed at night, the phone's out in another room, and if it rings, and I don't hear it. And I just love the sound of silence during the night. So thanks for listening, and hang around and watch this great anthem that Wade has written and produced. It's really, really well written, and I just love it. Thanks for watching. See you next time.
Out in the Bass Strait where the wild winds blow, there's a rugged little island that the brave call home, where the coast is rough and the ocean so deep, where the stories of the sailors and the farmers don't sleep. King Island, rock of the sea, standing strong and proud, wild and free, from the bee farms to the roaring tide. Feel the heartbeat of the island, let it be your guide. From the old Cape Wickham lighthouse to the rolling plains, echoes of the kelpers and the cattlemen remain, with the cheese that's renowned and the sunsets that burn. Every soul that comes here has a lesson to learn. King Island, rock of the sea, standing strong and proud, wild and free, from the bee farms to the roaring tide. Feel the heartbeat of the island, let it be your guide. Through the mist and the rain, through the sun and the gale, the spirit of King Island will always prevail. With a heart made of rock and a soul forged in fire, it's a vibrant island that will never tire. King Island, rock of the sea, standing strong and proud, wild and free, from the bee farms to the roaring tide. Feel the heartbeat of the island, let it be your guide. Where the mutton birds soar and the kelpies roam, on the shores of the island everyone's home, with a lighthouse beaming through the southern night, guiding the dreamers with its steadfast light. Hear the waves crashing down on the golden sand, with the echoes of the past that forever stand. From the shipwrecks of old to the tales untold, King Island's legacy will never